Hello everybody, got a short video for you today. It's going to be the last video of the week because all I want you to do to finish this week is work on the Section 3 review, numbers 1 through 6, and that's on page 525. Basically, I'm expecting that with the shortened video today, and then just 10 minutes of work today, 20 minutes of work tomorrow, and then finishing it up on Friday, you'll be able to turn it in no problem. Uh, if you're having any kind of issues, just let me know. But basically, you can handwrite them and just take a picture and upload that picture into the assignments. It's very helpful if you can make sure that those things go into the assignments rather than messaging those to me. It's easier just to have everything in one place. It's not the end of the world, but I would really actually prefer if you put those worksheets that you're doing, those review questions, into the assignments for that reason. Today we're just going to kind of talk about Korea moving into the early modern era. It's the last thing for the Japan and Korea section that we've been doing. And then starting next week, we'll be moving into Southeast Asia and talking about Cambodia, place that I've worked in actually for several years now, for, well, going on 15 years, a little bit more than that maybe. And so it's kind of close to my heart, and we'll be talking about Thailand as well, and seeing what might be unique and different about those cultures. But let's just take a look at the movement into the early modern era for Korea here. First, just a reminder, last time we talked about Korea, we were seeing that the Koryo dynasty was being overthrown, and the Yi dynasty was being established in 1392, and they're going to rule for a long time, not just into the early modern era, but into what we would probably call the modern era. Now, clearly, these traditional cultures, Japan and Korea, aren't going to modernize at the same rate as maybe France and England, and they're going to have different value systems that drive those modernization time frames. But for the Yi dynasty, they're definitely going to be a part of this modernization of Korea to at least the earliest stages of it. One thing that's true about it is that Korea does maintain its distinctiveness. Even though it's caught between these two giant cultures, Japan and China, it's going to maintain a distinctiveness, and the Yi dynasty itself will contribute to that distinctiveness. For instance, they will establish a new capital, which is still the foremost city in South Korea, at least, which is today's Seoul, but Hansung was the capital. Second thing that they do to manage this distinctiveness is they're sort of partnering with Chinese society. What I mean by that is that they tended to take on enough Chinese influence to kind of keep China happy, and also to promote a healthy society for Korea. Some of the Chinese patterns and organizational and cultural norms were positive, and Korea borrowed from them. One thing that's distinct from China, though, and distinct from Japan, is the Korean alphabet is different. Their own alphabet functions differently. It's not just different symbols, but the symbols themselves stand for sounds rather than standing for an idea. You might remember when we were talking about China, we talked about how each of their symbols stands for an idea or a concept, and we looked at sort of like a sun setting over a tree, and that was the east, or sorry, the sun rising was the east, right? And so this is a very different approach. It's the approach that we have, of course, with the phonetic alphabet, that every letter is a sound rather than an idea, but it stands out in terms of the East. Now, despite borrowing from China, there had been a real effort to try to isolate by the Yi dynasty, because the Chinese were very likely to come to dominate. And so the effort by the Yi dynasty was to avoid that fate. And it's not just China. It's actually Japan as well. What we end up seeing is Japan actually starting that. We've talked about Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and we see how his invasion, actually in this case of Korea, is going to really kind of cause this extreme reaction from the Yi dynasty. This is going to happen in the 16th century, and what he was hoping to do is actually invade China, and he wanted to use Korea as sort of a staging area. And when he did that, he actually kidnapped or even killed many of the skilled workers in Korea. It was very damaging to the Korean economy. And then beyond that, lots of ruined farmland. It was sort of a slash and burn method that Toyotomi was taking. And this led Korea to try to isolate. They actually got the nickname the Hermit Kingdom for that reason. But their isolation wouldn't last, because China actually attacks in the 17th century and ends up making the Yi dynasty subject to China's power. Now, they stay independent. They're not controlled by China to the degree that they're a part of China, but they are subservient to China, having to grant certain levels of influence to the Chinese government and to the Chinese economy and to the Chinese military. But their goal had been to be isolated. So what we see is that's true of Korea going into the modern era. Now, it's not something we'll cover in this class, but Korea will end up becoming a big part of this kind of tug of war between Russia, China, and Japan going into the 1800s and then all the way into the 20th century. And so it's interesting to see that tug of war take place. It even eventually leads to a strain between the Korean people themselves over whether to become communist or not. Their neighbors to the north and to the west, China and Russia, became communist, and Japan became democratic after the World War, after World War II. And so that's going to lead to Korea splitting. Constantly in Korean history, you see the influence of their neighbors. Despite their highest hopes of remaining independent, they're influenced by these powerful neighbors of theirs. Anyway, take the next 2 days to finish up Section 3 review. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you need any help. And we'll jump into Korea and Thailand. Sorry, not Korea. Cambodia and Thailand on Monday. Have a great weekend too if I don't talk to you at all or interact with you. Miss you guys, and we're praying for you. And I hope that the weather starts to get warmer for us all soon.